Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the 14th session in the deep dive series. If you have been following all the previous sessions in this series, we have completed 13 sessions before. Here's the list of all the sessions that we have completed so far. And in today's session, we have Ariana and Chad going over the rate and review journey, including the goals, the advanced coding, and how to do the QA and testing. Welcome, Ariana and Chad. Thanks for spending time and sharing your insights today. And everyone, if you have missed any of the previous sessions, then we have the recordings uploaded on the YouTube channel at the rate MC Learning Camp. And these next next sessions also will be added. It will be posted on the Phoenix Marketers group. Make sure that you register to these sessions as well. And with these three sessions, we will be completing the deep dive series for the month of October, and we have two more sessions lined up. So we'll be adding it soon, maybe in the month of November. Stay tuned. If you all are already part of the Phoenix Marketers group, you will get automated notifications for that. And this session also will be recorded and posted to the YouTube channel after the session. Any questions during the session, please post them in the chat window, and I will let Ariana and Chad answer them as and when they prefer. And I think that is it. With that, I will turn it over to you both, Ariana and Chad.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Please state.
I am a little worried about my internet quality, so I'm going to go off camera and just save my bandwidth and share my screen. Okay. Is everyone able to see?
Yeah, we can see.
Great.
Just make sure that you are doing the slideshow.
Yeah.
Or the presentation.
Give a refresh here. It wasn't liking my commands.
And in the meantime, this comes up, I want to share something real quick. If anybody who is attending this session, if you have a specific and interesting use case within the Journey Builder, which hasn't been covered in the previous sessions, please feel free to reach out to us, to me or Tim, if you are interested to present. So we will be helping you with the presentation or the slides or the flow. If you're really interested, and if it is the first time, we'll be providing guidance as well. So if you have an interesting use case and interested, let us know. Seems all good, Chad.
Awesome. Okay. My name is Chad Daniels. I am a technical manager at Merkle. I work closely with my colleague, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks, Chad. My name is Ariana Schleisman, and I manage our platform architecture team at Merkle, specifically our marketing cloud platform architects. So today we are going to be walking through maybe a familiar journey to some folks on the call, especially in the retail space, the rate and review journey. Walk through initial considerations, some custom build that Chad has worked on very recently, and then some of our best practices for testing and QA. And if you are interested, we also have a template for QA that we rely on heavily. So I think with that, we will get started.
All right, we will get going. Yeah.
Okay, so like I said, today we are going to walk through a rate and review journey. If you are not familiar with rate and review programs, they're meant to get feedback from customers on purchases that they have recently made. The experience, we always hope that the experience feels personalized and very timely, and that their ability to provide feedback is very easy and simple to do. It is an ask that you are making as the provider, and so you want to make it as simple as you can for your customers. Oftentimes, unfortunately, though, the data required to execute these communications, especially in a personalized and timely manner, is not readily or easily available. So creating an interesting solution to meet those requirements sometimes comes up. So you got to get a little creative. And just a couple call outs here for why rate and review today. 99.75% of online shoppers read reviews at least once in a while, which I found fascinating and maybe not so fascinating because I know I do the same. I don't know if anybody else goes straight to Amazon to see reviews, even for a giggle sometimes, but they are heavily relied upon. And 93% of those shoppers say that this impacts whether or not they purchase a product. So collecting reviews from your customers, especially happy customers, and making that experience an easy one is critical for shoppers who are considering purchasing your products. So like I mentioned, there are a number of ways to solution for rate and review programs. And oftentimes that comes down to what and where your source data is coming from. It depends on your use case, your tech stack, if you're working with a third party, and your desired customer experience. So today, the use case we will be walking through for rate and review, we are looking at our data sources coming from a payload that we are receiving from a third party that is going to a legacy triggered send API call. I'm going to guess some folks on the call have also seen this method where data is coming into a triggered send definition. Chad's going to talk a little bit about, what's our ideal state and what's reality. So this is just an interesting case that we worked from. Our customer experience, we are sending 2 emails inviting them to rate and review a recent purchase. Goal criteria is going to be checking to see if customers have successfully submitted a product review. And for data out, we are going to be reporting on email engagement data and review request conversion rates. So please let me know if anyone has any questions, but that is sort of the meat of what we'll be covering today.
Cool. As I was putting slides for my portion of this together, I was looking for some inspiration. So there were a couple trailblazing together webcasts that I decided to just kind of pop on and see what the general feel of it was, and how people generally liked to go through the slides. And there's some smart people in trailblazing together, and the solutions that are suggested were 100% spot on. Definitely, in the best case, you definitely want to do that whenever you're able to. Definitely, follow all of the best practices that have been laid out, especially over the past, last half a year that you've been putting on the Journey Builder deep dives and fundamentals, JB. So really what kind of got me thinking about as we were kind of thinking this is like, if you work in Salesforce Marketing Cloud long enough, I think we all kind of know, right? The reality is sometimes those best practices are just really, really unlikely to be able to happen, or they're downright impossible. The client doesn't want to spend the money to do what's needed. There's not enough technical resources to do what's needed. There are a whole host of reasons why the best practice or the preferred method can't be implemented. That actually is one of the things that brings me to the good news is best practice doesn't mean it's the only practice. Marketing Cloud, to me, when I started getting into the platform, was really, it amazed me in the way of how much power and customization and just flexibility that you had. Like if you dreamed it, for a lack of better terms, you could do it, most of the time. Wasn't easy sometimes, but you could do it. So with that, and we're in, this rate and review context, it's not an incredibly complex journey, as you'll see in a few slides. But what I thought might be really helpful is to take a pretty simple, generic journey and highlight real life examples that we've experienced where it's not so simple sometimes. So, and really what we were able to do, although they weren't the preferred method or the path that we would have, recommended, we were still able to deliver a solution that does work and it is reliable and for the most part. And so um, when you're falling back on the concepts that are sort of like your second and third and fourth option, um, what I found is it's way more enjoyable to work in the platform because then it's sort of like a puzzle that you're putting together and you're not worried about the first one not fitting. So yeah, so I had the ChatGPT actually generated this photo. This is I asked it to put together a, I believe the term is wabi sabi in Japan, and it's the art form of like melding back broken dishes, but putting gold in the cracks to sort of be like, those are the good things. Those are the things that were perfectly imperfect. So I figured that was a good image to go with this message of like, it's not always the perfect solution, but sometimes it's pretty cool.
It's wonderful, and thanks for throwing light on the best practices. I agree with that. So if when given a problem, there will be 10 different ways to solve it. Best practice can be one of the best way.
Absolutely. Frankly, that when I was starting out in Marketing Cloud, that was the most terrifying thing, right? There wasn't one answer. So I didn't work with people like Ariana or Greg at that time. So I didn't have people to bounce off, Marketing Cloud ideas or questions. And it just kind of had to blindly go, I hope that this is the right solution. And, half the time it was a suboptimal solution or there were things that weren't perfect about it. But when you get more experienced into the platform, that same concept actually becomes really invigorating, right? Because you're not like always hit with a slam door. You're like, oh, I'm not going to give up yet. I need to work on giving up sometimes. Sometimes I can over obsess, but it really is part of the fun. It makes the job fun, honestly. So this was actually a really fun one. I'm going to cover, this is sort of like a review based on what I saw in some of the kind of events that have already happened, but I still thought it was kind of cool because it's like they're concepts that are all sort of that you're touching on and bringing them together to sort of MacGyver together a solution at the end of the day. So we'll just hop into kind of the different ways we went about solving this. So yeah, and as Ariana mentioned in her earlier slide, the first kind of when the client came to us, the first part of this was they were looking to move from this being it's a two-touch journey. First touch used to be a triggered send, and then Automation Studio would pick up in the send log for the last 24 hours and send them a second email via that automation. So there was a triggered send and an automation that came together to support this whole functionality, and they wanted to migrate it to Journey Builder. It's great. I think that's a great idea. However, the first kind of obstacle that we faced was the API call that we are still supporting in the real life example, not in the fake example. But the API call that we still are supporting is it's making a triggered send API call. However, we were, again, let's talk best case scenario, right? If you're going to make an API call, hey, got a great option for you. You can just go and make an entry event API call, journey at REST endpoint, really robust, really good. Well, technical resources are hard to prioritize. There's a ton of things that are requiring those, and we still haven't been able to get that type of resource on the client side to be able to make that happen. So we were still getting the data into Marketing Cloud, and they were really hoping that we could still make it work the way it's currently configured. So I felt kind of silly doing this, but not actually doing it. I like the solution, but the like it's a solution. The first part of it is such a simple solution, it seems silly. The first thing I did was test out the exclusion script on the triggered send, because we couldn't have those actually going out. So it's just a exclusion script on the triggered send definition of 1 equals 1. It's always going to be true. It's always going to suppress the send, and we can reliably, know that we're getting that. Basically, we're turning it into like a data extension upsert at that point, or not upsert, append at that point, because we're just taking the data that's in that triggered send data extension, and we're basically injecting it into this journey, which we'll go into in a little bit. But that was the first part of this. The second part was that we had to retrieve records via query in Automation Studio, and then we would use that to inject it into the newly created journey. Problem 2, and this isn't an extraordinary problem, but it was something that we had to solve for, is the triggered send as it currently sits, or as it currently sat. It made an API call to a data extension, and inside of that data extension actually was, at this point when we migrated, it was an XML payload. So we had an attribute or field in the data extension called XML payload, excuse me, and inside of the body of the email that sends this out, it goes ahead and it parses that XML payload to get every product that they had ordered on that order number, and kind of go one by one and stack them on top of each other so that they can click on the ones they want to review. So because we were going from a journey, or excuse me, a triggered send where there's no primary key, to a journey where we did only want to add new records, we're going to need to put a primary key on it, excuse me, and into that journey builder data extension entry extension. And well, if you are in there in that data extension and we have it set to only let new records in, it's just going to update you, because if we only have email address for primary key. So the next thing that let me bring this over. I'll just do a live demo. This is just a sandbox account. So, but the next thing we said was, well, hey, we need a composite key, right? Because it's going to be essentially order number and order date, because actually, I configured this wrong in the sandbox. It is subscriber key too. So it's subscriber key is the primary key along with order number. I think I just misclicked that and hit order date. Apologies. And so what that does is a new record can get injected for every subscriber's order. So the problem there is order number is not passed as a data extension field or in part of their API payload as part of the email XML. So I may be leading into the next slide, so I think I'll pop it over. Yeah. So second obstacle, right? We needed to rebuild that data extension schema to govern journey entry. So I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. And so what we actually had to do, if you can see down here, is we are actually parsing that XML payload for the first order. It's provided in an array of 1, but we know we're only ever going to get 1 order because that's how the data upstream works. But we still going to be very transparent XML is not a very frequent language, schema that I work with on a day-to-day basis. So it took me a good little bit, a couple hour, 2, 3, to get this parsed and written to that order number. But we were really concerned about whether or not that was going to be a feasible thing to do, making sure that it was structured correctly. But the good news is it was. But if I had thought that this, when we first kind of signed off on the work to help the client with, I did not think we'd be parsing an Excel payload in a SQL query to get this data. I thought we were just going to be, parsing it just like we did. But, these are the concepts that are, they're not journey builder specific, at least some of them are not. That having the sort of breadth of platform knowledge, it wasn't like, hey, sorry, we can't do this anymore. So it was a fun solution to build together with the team. And what ended up happening is that composite key working just fine, adding new unique orders, and writing that as the entry DE. See here if I have. So yeah, and that was that. And so when this query finished running, you see it's getting an hour from the time of the query. So it runs every hour. And essentially, this is what we do to get all of the last hourly, inject them into the journey, which I will just head over to now just to kind of. Sure. Okay. Yes. So to sort of just give you a quick rundown, that is pretty much configured very close to what it looks like in live production. There is a email creative that is built. Now, this email creative is a dynamic email. This is touch 1 and this is touch 2. This is the same email creative. So what ends up happening is there is an attribute in the data extension that it looks for, and when it does the lookup, it evaluates what the value is, and then it decides what creative to render. That can be basically one of 4 formats. When you're dealing with a multi-branded client using similar content blocks, or actually the same content blocks shared, where they're sort of communal, like the core of it is communal because it's built so dynamically. The reason, because it begs the question, well, why are you making it dynamic if there's only 2 emails? When you have 8 brands, every time there's a change, then it's making that change over 16 different emails. So the rationale there is you're making one change, and it's a little bit more of a thing to manage. But the people who, I did not come up with the solution, but the people who did on the team are they're lights out. So that email is sent. We wait an hour, and I am not going to go into the second step actually, because I do want to go back, because this is where we're going to tie into the third obstacle that we ran into. Yes, goal configuration, conversion tracking, and rendering emails correctly. For reasons we don't need to go into, we did not have the ability to set up Data Designer with the appropriate configuration and connections with an attribute group. So what ended up happening is we only had the ability to work with journey data, which obviously, takes a snapshot during the entry. Really problematic when we are trying to eject people from the journey if they do leave a review, right? Or if they have already had a purchase, already had a review in the last 6 months, because I believe that's a suppression criteria. Or if not, we could make that a criteria in this sort of use case. So contact data actually gave us a few problems. I'm going to go over the email rendering really quickly. So apologies for not having the actual visual rendering of what the email looked like. Apologize, but I'm going to go into, did I lose that data extension? Let me pop up again. So I mentioned that earlier, this was an automation. Actually, it was a triggered send and then an automation. So when this email criteria was, and I actually had kind of missed this until QA, when this email was looking for something, and let me grab it quickly so we can have a data extension to reference. Okay. So, I copied it. This is a triggered send data extension. You can see by the template that's like up here. This is a triggered send data extension that I just copied to make it a journey entry. But what I want to kind of call out is it has this field called email variant, right? And so this is what the previous logic had looked up, and it'd say, hey, if it was like a store and online, right? So, hey, if email variant is purchase store, show them that store content that we want to give them. But if it's purchase online, T1 purchase online, show them the online stuff. Now, that was fine because it was one email, and in the triggered send, it would refer to the triggered send data extension, and then it would get picked up and put into an automation, and that automation had its own send DE. So it would go and it would look at that send DE, and it would say, hey, what's the email variant? It would say, oh, it's T2 now because we have a new data extension and we're setting the email for variant accordingly. And we're going to go ahead and say, oh, is it T2 store or T2 online? And it worked awesome. When we got into QA, I'm like, why isn't the T2 showing up on that second send? Well, journey data, right? It was looking back at this data extension and saying, what's the email variant? And the email variant was just still T1. So that was another issue that we had to solve. And I am excited to go over data binding because I'm a nerd, but I know Tim had just recently done a really big breakdown. It was one of the tutorials that I watched getting ready for this. Just he did a really, really great job. So I won't go too much into it because I would just recommend everybody take the time and watch that. But we said, okay, well, we need to change this email creative. Instead of looking, for that attribute in the send DE, what now I really want to do is I need to track it somehow. I need to, log that we were able to, send this person T1. So when T2 goes either, they go down here into T2, that email lookup goes, I'm not going to look at the source DE. I'm going to look at this log DE. So essentially, ratings, reviews, journey builder tracking, and it's just a data extension. And so again, this is updating, and it's writing to a couple of different fields. Status, which is just like I'm hard coding. I sent them the first invite. Event date is just a current date. Actually, let it here. Event date is current date. And then order number and create date are using data binding. So again, I won't go too far into it, but data binding is essentially the one kind of last chance you have to have this journey data interact a little bit more dynamically and currently with the other data sources you have in Marketing Cloud, when you don't have contact data to make those connections and use contact data. And so essentially, if I may, I'll just go into this really quickly. I believe they call this mustache and handlebars, maybe nomenclature, but it's essentially, if you've ever looked at any GTL, it does the same thing. It's pretty widely used, but this event data is what we use to inject that contact into the journey. And so it's saying, okay, this is the person that we're going to reference, and we're going to bind that, and we're going to say, again, this is that event definition that was created when we connected the Fire event activity in Automation Studio. And then it's going to give me a dot to signify that the data extension's done with. And then it's going to wrap quotes into the field that we want to bind with in the entry source. So obviously, order number is order number. Create date is pretty straightforward. And so what that does is it writes to this JB, or where was it? It's right here. Ratings, reviews, JB tracking. And again, these are dummy emails, so I can't go into the logic and discuss it too much. But essentially, what happens there is there's a lookup, and it goes, "Hey, was this subscriber in there with this order number, and did they get that first sent?" And if it says yeah, then it changes to the T2 content, and then it checks if they bought online or in the store. And if they're not found, if it's empty, then we know that they were not tracked. So they would be a T1 because they haven't been added to that data extension. And so that's how that logic in the email works. One quick call out, the email, it is pretty AMP script heavy. So when there is a high throughput, it does take a bit to build. So what we were seeing, we had like a 5-minute wait step because we knew it had to build before we wanted it to be updated, because if it doesn't finish, then this is not going to do anything. It's going to kind of skip along. So we were seeing a lot of people getting skipped. So we extended that to 1 hour. And that way we kind of knew that it would get written, that update, it would finish being sent before that update journey tracking would start. And that's just a kind of call out. We caught, I'll say before QA, but it was just after launch because it was just such a sneaky, a sneaky problem to have. But those are things that without a good QA process, those are easy to miss because they're not super obvious. It's not something you can go in and look at. And then we're going to do that update tracking activity. We're going to wait a day. We're going to take a look. We're going to do an engagement split, and we're going to say changes. And we're going to say, okay, did they click on the first touched email? If they did, we're going to go and let them go. We're not going to send them another email. They were able, they saw it, they clicked on a link. We're not going to, this is basically because we couldn't identify, we couldn't eject them, right? Without being able to look at the, contact data, essentially. So I still have thoughts about whether or not we could maybe optimize this and, maybe add a query and get this connected somehow, but it works good enough. It's a good solution. It's 95% of the way there, right? This is the broken plate with the gold in between it. And so they wait a day and then they exit the journey. If they had not clicked the email, because just open rates are obviously so unreliable currently, we go ahead and send them same email, but it gets the T2 creative because it finds them in the update tracking DE, and then it goes ahead and updates that journey tracking, waits a day, and is on its merry way. And that's pretty much the journey. Like I said, super simple, but the nuances that the curveballs bring, that's what's so exciting. That's what's so much fun about this. It's not doing the same thing every day, that's for sure. Let me get back to the slides here. Sorry, we're not over. I just got ahead of myself. Surprise, surprise. But that is everything that's that I had for the moment. So I will go ahead and hand it back over to Ariana.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So to round out development and launch, right? Chad mentioned there's a lot of testing that goes in. Noting here, it's incredibly important to map and document all of those use cases before you begin testing, so you can make sure you uncover any of those small little nuances. As I mentioned, we do have a template for creating those use cases and performing testing in QA, which I will share here in the chat. But just a few to outline here, what does the solution look like when a customer is eligible to review one product? What does it look like when they're eligible to review more than one product? If a customer has ordered and since returned a product, should they still get a review email? Are there differences for customers who have purchased in store or online? And as I mentioned, if your customer is purchasing from a multi-brand company, what does that email creative look like? How are those products organized? And what sort of branding is the deployment email serving to that customer? Another thing to consider is that a lot of rate and review programs are tied to sweepstakes or other types of offers. And oftentimes those are managed by another vendor, especially loyalty vendors or promotions vendors. So other requirements to consider are any legal requirements for maintaining any of that send or product data for customers that you're deploying the rate and review sweepstakes to. Also, will there be that closed feedback loop to Marketing Cloud to know that a customer has actually completed the review cycle? Sometimes with those sweepstakes requirements, there are additional needs to be met to ensure you're complying with, so sorry, my daughter just woke up and I can hear her rustling around. Are there requirements to ensure that you're reaching back out to customers to make sure they are completing that sweepstakes if they are eligible? And then finally, after launching your journey, we always recommend post-launch monitoring of all programs in Marketing Cloud. For journeys, we specifically keep a close eye on several of those assets that Chad has reviewed, reviewing record counts to make sure that you're receiving the expected count of eligible customers day to day. A rate and review, if it's running hourly, you could be checking every few hours. Spot checking any payloads on live records. We know, right, especially if we're working with clients who work in both development and production environments, sometimes there are, unfortunately, some hiccups that happen with those payload creations. Also monitoring deliverability of any of your touches. This is just something that should be done all the time, especially when you're launching any new creative or journeys. Make sure you've selected all your right delivery profiles and all that good stuff. Also ensuring that all of your journey activities remain active. As Chad mentioned, sometimes these emails can take a little bit of time to build, especially if they're heavily dependent on AMP script. And if you do, accrue high error counts or queue ages, sometimes those activities can be paused. So ensuring you're routinely checking, especially after initial launch, to make sure that you're not running into any of those kind of common hiccups. And then finally, reviewing the customer flow, pick a few records on your day of launch and follow those customers through their journey over the next few days, and just making sure that they are flowing through as you expected. Again, we can test as much as we want before we hit that launch button, but there's always the chance that something goes not quite the way you expected it to in testing. So I'm sharing our QA template here in the chat. You are welcome to download, browse it, use it to enhance your own, just leaving it there if it's helpful for anyone. We love our documentation on this side of things. And with that, that is all we had prepared for today. So if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, happy to answer those.
It's a wonderful overview, Chad and Ariana. I like the way that you presented, like a step-by-step approach. This is really insightful. And everyone, please post your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question directly. And the document that you shared, Ariana, I'm going to link it in the recording as well. So who
Absolutely.
missed this session can go back and access that. And I see one question here, Chad and Ariana. Now, this is about the journey performance when using the triggered send in conjunction with the exclusion scripts that can be set within the journey configuration. So instead of using the exclusion script within the send triggered send definition, I think they're talking about including that on the journey configuration.
So it's hard to kind of make it, apparent without, being, yeah, I guess it's hard to explain it without like in front of like being able to screen share with it. So I apologize that I can't, but essentially the triggered send definition was, for all intents and purposes, deprecated. So putting the 1 equals 1 on that is because they, on the client side externally, they could not redirect that API call, converted into a payload that would be acceptable by the interactions endpoint that fires off the API entry event. And so without that, well, I suppose, depending, it could have paused. Yeah, so that's a good point, but that was kind of how we were initially. It's kind of one of those things where we put it into place and it worked, and it hasn't had any performance issues. So, but that's a good thing to think about. It's, I will have to review it to see if maybe we can make an alternative approach to that. That's helpful, actually. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. And the script, AMP script, which is being used in the email, can you please also share that for reference?
Yeah, so what I can do is I can provide some snippets of AMP script that are pertinent. It will be sanitized, obviously, for confidentiality purposes, but definitely the specific techniques that we are using, I'd be happy to put some snippets together. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, of course.
I think those are all the questions for now, Chad. I don't see any other questions. So we can be online for a few more minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, to see if there are any questions, or else we can call it a wrap.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I like I said, I know a lot of this is a review of the concepts that were kind of covered in all of the other fundamentals and deep dives in terms of the data binding and the entry events, all that stuff. So makes sense that there may not be a ton of questions, but I did, for me, how I learn is like, I take a concept. Concepts don't mean anything to me until I have to deal with them and dig my hands into them. So I'm hopeful that one other person has sort of the same learning style that I have, and this kind of maybe put a couple of dots together for somebody.
I like the approach.
Thanks.
I think we're good for today's session, Chad. I don't see any other questions. Everyone, if you have any other questions, feel free to post them on the Slack channel. So I can direct the questions to Chad and Ariana so I can get their answers later on. And thank you once again, Chad and Ariana, and thanks everyone for joining today's session.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.